Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the showing of the documentary Restless Ground. Before we view the film, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of special guests. One of them is here, and I hope the other one to be joining by the time we finish the film. I'm quite sure he's seen it already. Um, one of they will both be in the film and then be on hand to provide additional information and to answer questions. William Jones is a member of Mother African Union Church and came forward to head the effort to restore dignity and seek justice for those buried at Mount Olive Cemetery by volunteering to be the head groundskeeper. And it is quite a big job. Dr. Regina Barry has degrees in theology and chemistry and has worked in manufacturing and information technology. She serves as a volunteer historian for these restless but sacred grounds by helping to identify those buried here, which you will learn is not an easy task and is seemingly never ending. You're about to learn some of the reasons why. So we'll start the video of Restless Grounds. It's not there. Okay, give me a minute.
Do not feel like the Lone Ranger. It happens to me every time.
We practiced last
I
night.
know.
Okay. Roger, if you want to run up here and that would be great. I know I have it. I know I have it on doc, so right, it should be right there. Back to the Zoom.
Regina, when I encounter these issues, I say
You
I've
see
done
it?
6,497 Zooms and something different has gone wrong every time. So, yeah.
That is completely fair.
Share, but I don't see the,
I don't see it. Did
okay.
you sure you put it on the dock?
Well, here's that. And it's right there. Should I click that now?
Okay, click that and see what happens.
Okay.
Did you say share?
Let me,
All right, now go back to the Zoom.
okay. Zoom
See,
is,
just zoom here.
wait. Okay. I thought I had it. Okay, just give me a second.
We aren't going anywhere. Take your time.
Yeah, but I'm fine. And I'm going to drop off the phone because you all know I'm alive now and I'll have just one screen.
All right, great.
When I found out about the history of Mount Olive Cemetery, honestly, I had mixed emotions. Like other cemeteries, like Mount Olive, even in death, these individuals were not given the proper honor and dignity that they deserve.
I think this cemetery for me is really important that we tell the story and tell it accurately and look into the camera and talk about harsh and hard truths about things that happened here.
We didn't get where we are without what happened in the past. And we need to always acknowledge that.
My heart just started to break, just knowing that many of the ancestors of people in the community in Wilmington were buried at Mount Olive Cemetery, and the condition of the cemetery had not been taken care of for many years.
You know, the fundamental unfairness and, quite frankly, rottenness of it, something that'll never go away from me.
It is American history, and we need to know it.
Death is not the end. Death becomes an opportunity for a new beginning, where we are celebrating our loved ones. And we're going to have this joyful occasion, even in the midst of grief. That sort of relationship that exists that we need to share with people.
And hopefully when people go in there in future days, they'll be like, hey, we did this wrong in the past, but we're getting it right.
The name of my church is the Historic Mother African Union Church, affectionately known as the Motherland Nation. Unbeknownst to many, we are the oldest African American incorporated church in America.
that was started in 1813 by a man named Peter Spencer. And that's a little known Black history fact. The church became an owner of the Mount Olive Cemetery in the early 1900s. And the cemetery used to be located in what is now Bancroft Parkway.
The leadership at that time wanted to move those bodies, wanted that space. In fact, they did a city park, and to get them out of the city limits, out of the city, they condemned them so they could haul those bodies and moved it. Mount Olive is just outside of the city limits.
They decided to dig up the cemetery and move the bodies out to Lancaster Avenue so white folks could have somewhere to build houses. Plain and simple.
And they were stacked and not put in individual graves.
What always reflected in my mind was, how in the hell can y'all just move a cemetery to make room for somebody to build some houses? And to this day, I think that was awful.
What that tells you is there was no appreciation and no respect for Black bodies and what we brought and what we did.
And the church has been kind of the owner of the cemetery, or I'll put that in quotes, of the cemetery since then.
And it was more than one cemetery that was moved from Wilmington.
There was originally an African cemetery on the edge of Front and Union Street. Then the various churches downtown and Bancroft Parkway would have been built on the backside of those cemeteries as they moved. And a friend of mine at work was a very small child when they were digging cellars along Union Street there. And apparently they did find some human remains that didn't get moved.
People did see bones in proximity to what was in the pathway when that construction was being done. And during severe inclement weather, they have seen bones actually in the road.
And Mount Olive was a new cemetery. So it was easy to take those bodies, those Black bodies, and they range from Louis Redding's parents buried there to military soldiers, all everyday folk buried there. We think over 13,000 individuals are buried there.
Some of the folks who did the moving knew full well that those cemeteries were moved in the floodplains and didn't give a damn. Just epitomizes everything that was wrong.
Early 2022, the county executive came to me about a request that he received from a gentleman named Bill Jones, who was a volunteer at the Mount Olive Cemetery. And there was a request to support the purchase of some equipment to mow the lawn and take care of the grounds. And so the county executive invited me to go with him to visit the cemetery to talk to Mr. Jones.
Well, first of all, when I went there, I was expecting to see a cemetery. And what I really saw was like an overgrown field where it was barely identifiable that there was anything there.
A lot of trees covering headstones. Actually, some of the headstones had fallen over. And I could tell that some of the graves were starting to sink into the ground. As you go further and further into the burial grounds, you notice that the headstones are facing the wrong way because there wasn't much care during the time where these individuals were moved from other cemeteries, that they just kind of placed them where they could. It dawned on me that a site that was so important to the community, not only in Wilmington, but of all of Delaware, had not been taken care of for many, many years.
If we are the quote unquote owners of the Mount Olive Cemetery, then we need to take ownership. We need to begin to cultivate. We need to begin to bring it back. But the person who's kept it going, I would say in the last 10, 15 years has been, Brother Bill Jones.
A lot of this story is about a single person who simply is so dedicated to his ancestors, our community, and the accurate telling of history, honoring something that for generations has not been honored.
Baby, make my heart go. You, baby, make my heart
Like this. Well, my name is William Jones. I've been struggling with what to call myself. I guess I'm the groundskeeper, I'm the steward. Initially, what happened was I was a member of the trustee board. We're responsible for the church properties. Somebody had to oversee or be responsible for Mount Olive. And for some reason, I volunteered. I said, well, you know, so I'm the person that cuts the grass is kind of what I say. Mr. Jones is a person who is very determined to get the job done, even if it seems like an indefinite amount of time and energy that's going to go into that job.
You know, right away, he's in charge. And he has a passion and has worked 200 times a week. He goes over.
Miss Barry, who does research on who's buried here and does genealogy. One day she emailed me, said, Bill, I think I found your grandfather. And he's at Mount Olive. You know, I said, wow. He's got a marker out there, he's number 407. She mentioned that a lot of graves out here, they don't have tombstones, they don't have headstones, they just have a marker with a number. And so as you can see, like these stones, like that's part of the hazard of cutting. You gotta look out for the stones. And when the grass is high, some of them you can't even see. For instance, here's 228, 294, 395. Wow, there's 407.
When I started working with Bill, he mentioned that his grandfather was buried here. And we were like, where? Don't know. So went down to the Delaware Historic Society. They had 5 little file folders. And it turned out that on Mr. Levi Jones's burial permit, he was buried at stone 407. Then I went and we got the marker and we put it in, and he was really happy about that.
But that's my grandfather, you can see, born March 4th, 1882. I was born March the 2nd.
I think what is important to me and what keeps me going with this project, even after all these years, is the joy that other people have, because these people built the community of Wilmington.
And that's what this does, that all kinds of emotion come out of this, all kind of history. And that's, you're angry, you're grateful at this point, and you're hopeful that in the future, we will be able to share and understand the history and how important it is to know the impact that African Americans have had on the history of Delaware and of this nation.
Everybody here mattered during their life, whether it was short or long, what kind of jobs they had, and studying the people here and the jobs they had and the roles they had in society shows you an entire arc of African American history. We have former enslaved people here. We have people who worked with the Underground Railroad. We have sailors here who served in the Merchant Marine before the Civil War, because that was one of the occupations that was relatively open to African Americans at the time. So there are many, many people here of every occupation available in the city.
The more you clear, the more you see there are hundreds and hundreds of individuals who are buried here, each of whom lived a life.
You have abandoned African American cemeteries all over the country. For various reasons, they were abandoned. I feel to preserve the history that we have, hold on to the property that we have best we can.
I give a lot of credit to Bill Jones for what he has done as a volunteer to make sure that these families have some dignity.
inspectors ticketed because of the overgrown brush and wasn't maintained, and there were complaints about it. In Public Works, this became a project, and the department started volunteering once a month to help assist with the cleanup and the maintenance of Mount Olive Cemetery.
At first, it was organizing volunteers, and then the more we got involved, the more we said we have to do right by this cemetery. We need to do right by our ancestors, by Delawareans who put their time in. And so now we're looking at how do we take this in partnership with this extraordinary historical church community and make it something that our community is proud of.
We have an opportunity to make it live again. And it's important that we understand and we have the proper history about it. That's why we're working also with the Trust for Public Lands.
The segregation and discrimination and the hate, it's just something that I feel we have an obligation to make right.
This isn't just an effort to maintain the landscaping around the cemetery. This is an effort that will take a lot of funding, a lot of attention to make sure that all of the graves there are revealed and restored to a point where we can find even more prominent African Americans who are buried there.
Even in death, we want to give them dignity to make sure that their tombstones and their final resting place is one that is respectable and not one of degradation.
I'm just really excited about the opportunity for Mount Olive. And our job will be to preserve it, to make sure that it's there for future generations.
Each and every stone represents a life. Each and every stone represents a story. I know that their story is connected to my story. And so I can only be thankful for all those lives that are here and the journey that they went through and the things that they did to survive and the things that they did to hold on to life. Eternal, most gracious God, we thank you for the opportunity to commune with the ancestors in this Mount Olive Cemetery. We pray, oh God, that not only those of us who are gathered here today, but that all people would understand and recognize the importance of burial grounds and how important it is to remember our ancestors, to acknowledge that they lived human lives, that they were human beings. It's important to acknowledge their struggle. It's important to acknowledge, dear God, for us, what they did to deliver us into the present age. I will fight. Now we pray right now that you will continue to connect us to them. Help us remember them. Help us to acknowledge their sacrifice. Help us, dear God, to live up to that sacrifice. And we pray that you will continue to be with us. It is in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that we pray. Amen. I can feel the weight of a heavy world.
I would just say that we still have a lot of work to be done. If you're available on the Thursday mornings, anywhere from 8 to 12, and you want to get a workout and you feel as though you want to contribute for whatever reason, then certainly you're welcome. In a sense, Mount Olive belongs to the community. So if the community wants to help to maintain it, we'd be glad to have them.
Take my hope away from me. But you can try. I'm a wild horse in a field of green. You're gonna waste your time chalking up a lie. You're a friend of mine. Caught you throwing lines, but told me I free. I'm so you take me for a fool. It's for you, for tongue I'll struggle telling truth. And now in your mind, boxing in your life, never asking why. To play your part was pipe and sing your side to shore. And I need me back. So
Okay.
Okay, great. So let me see, yeah, I'd love anybody to, well, why don't we have Regina Barry, jump in and give any accompanying information for us, and then certainly we'll
Sure.
opening everything up to questions too.
Sure. Let me get this started and then I will share my screen. Let's see if I can get that to come up because I'm going to say I can make the same mistakes as everyone else. uh, so you should see me in the middle of weeds.
Yes.
That is when I began trying to identify the tombstones at Mount Olive. That is
Oh.
2011, September.
Oh my gosh.
So let's see if I can get that. So you should be able to see that now. It's better.
Yeah.
This is the map that I found at the Delaware Historic Society. You should see a nice hand-drawn map on the left. And this is a screen grab that I got from an aerial drone shot on the right. And you can see still the original roads in what they call the parch. When a field dries out, you can see previous things. And you can see the original roads that are here there. This is one of the tombstones we found as we cleared Mount Olive. These are tombstones we found as we cleared Mount Olive. That was under the mulch. Trees make mulch all by them little selves. This went straight down into the ground because Mount Olive is kind of wetlands. There's a natural spring on the western side of the property. And a tombstone that doesn't have a broad base will sink just like a knife into butter. I don't know who this is yet. To get that out safely, you have to carefully dig around it and use a hoist. Not quite at that stage. This is our most recent tombstone, Civil War veteran Almarine Bush. My buddy Brian in Minnesota did the research. I did the request, and Mr. Purdy, who's now retired, set the stone for us. This is Mother Nature at work. This is moss, mold, lichens, bacteria, and sulfur dioxide from the air and other deposits. This is another one. Same thing. This one's mostly growing moss. And this is what it looks like after you clean it safely. There's one way to clean it safely, and if you're thinking power washer, I'm going to send you home because that's not it. The safe way to clean this is to use a solution called D2. It's a biological solution of enzymes and soap. You spray it on and you walk off. Don't touch, don't scrub, nothing. Trees like tombstones, they're yummy. So you can see that this one is gradually being swallowed by the trunk of the tree next to it. Sometimes we find these. They're metal temporary markers that were put in, and again, they're mostly from the late 60s and 70s, but there was never a tombstone placed. So this is the only record we have of the person who was buried there. And I have a friend who had a metal detector, and he went out there and helped us find a bunch of these. This is another tombstone we have. Hand-carved sandstone, and again, the moss, the lichens, the organic growth, eventually erasing it is what happens. This is me with another tree that's having a lovely dinner. This is Mary Calhoun's stone. She was buried in 1915. And at the time in 1915, that tree was probably a nice little tree behind her grave, or maybe even planted by her family. This is what it looks like now. And that's me for perspective. I'm 5'1", so gives you an idea of how big this is. And this is my nightmare. She made a lot of money cleaning graves on TikTok. We don't know what this is. It's her special cleaning solution. She scrubs the graves, and that, of course, tears up the surface of the stone. She scrapes the graves, and that tears up the surface of the stone. She slams vacuum cleaners down on the stove. And it's really scary to look at that because people will follow her activities, and that's the worst possible thing you can do. And apparently she's doing all this to sell the pink spray. So there you are. This is the right way to do it. This is D2. All you do is spray it on and leave. And in fact, you saw me spraying some on a stone in the movie. I'm not going to do anything else. It takes about 6 months to remove the lichen, the sulfide deposits, the moss, the mold, but this is literally how it works. That clear. And here's Enoch Jefferson, Civil War veteran. That was October. This was April. All I did was spray it once and leave. And you can see how clean it is. It's specifically used by the Park Service and the military cemeteries not to damage stone surface. I mean, even that little vine right there, I would not pull that vine because vines get little teeth that they dig into the surface of the stone. You pull it out, it leaves a tiny hole, which gets water in it, which freezes, which expands, which damages stones. So if I need to get rid of vines, I clip them at the bottom and let them die away naturally. So that is all I have to show about stones. But that was just a little extra information about what I do to help take care of these. And a cemetery is not a one-day job. The grass always grows. The stones need to be lifted back up. It's a slow process and it's continual. I see a raised hand.
Marjorie?
I loved your commentary, Regina, but I'm still confused as to where this cemetery is. I saw the
Okay.
map, but can somebody clarify that?
Well, you know where Odyssey School is? You know where Wegmans is?
Yeah.
It's surrounded by Wegmans and Odyssey School. It's on Lancaster Avenue, but its back end is the Odyssey School and its side end is the Wegmans Road.
Wow.
And there's a stream right there, and that little bridge in Lancaster Avenue right there. The cemetery, that stream actually starts about 2/3 of the way up the cemetery. I actually have some photographs of where it's bubbling out of the ground because that's where the water comes up.
Wow, thank you.
So
does the cemetery come up to Lancaster Pike?
Yes.
Yeah, because I worked at Barley Mill Plaza.
Oh, well, then you should know exactly where it is.
Drive right by it, and I just thought it was trees and grass.
Yeah, many people
the
said
longest
that.
time. Yeah, I didn't realize the cemetery was there at all.
Well, in 2011, a gentleman, Mr. Lee, Thomas Lee, brother Frankie, stopped at a genealogy library where I was volunteering to help people. And he wanted to know if there was a list of people buried in Mount Olive because he was cutting the grass at the time. And he wanted to do a Memorial Day service. And I said the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. Oh, I can make a list. I drive by there every day. I am still working on this said list. It's a slow process because although death records in Delaware are indexed and they're online, they're not indexed by cemetery. You have to look at every single page at the bottom to see what cemetery someone's in. And then there are newspaper obituaries. Then there are people who died out of state. So it's a very large process to gather all those records together.
How many do we think are, how many were reinterred and buried there versus directly being buried there? Do we have a split?
I didn't break it down by that. Because some of them are very contradictory. Daniel Anderson, who died around 1900, his newspaper obituary says that he's buried out of state. His Delaware death certificate says he's buried in St. Peter's, which would have been down on Bancroft Parkway and Union Street. And his actual burial permit says he's buried at Mount Olive out on Lancaster Avenue. His stone is at Mount Olive. Whether he was buried there originally or not, I don't know, because I got 3 separate records that are all primary sources. They're right there, place and time. I've never really broken it down because I've noticed that whatever the record said, sometimes there's some haziness about where they are.
I bet. Yeah.
Is the cemetery still used for fresh burials?
No, I don't think so. I've seen a couple of them as late as 1970, but nothing after that. And I don't think it's currently.
Who owns the property at this point?
I have not looked at the deed. I can't tell you.
So the designation, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, the one of the slides said designation as a Newcastle County Park. Is that what I saw in the
Yeah,
film?
they're working on that, but that goes beyond my scope. I just look for the bodies.
Yeah, because somebody's going to have to do the diligence of finding out where and on what deed. And of course, if nobody's paying the taxes, I guess maybe if that's church property, there are no taxes, but I'm not sure.
I would not know.
Yeah.
I've spent all my research efforts on finding who is buried in the designated cemeteries that ended up there, whether it was St. Peter's and some of the people from Ezion, which was right next to St. Peter's on Union Street. Some of them got moved there, and some of them got moved to Mount Zion, which is by the railroad tracks on Lancaster Avenue.
Yeah.
And then some of the people from where MBNA went in, some of them were moved to Mount Olive. And when they found the bodies in 1989, some of them were moved to Summit Bridge. So people are just moving all over the place.
Even after they've died. That's so interesting. I'm wondering, I don't know if you know this, Regina, but I don't know anything about this story. So what was happening on Bancroft Parkway back in the day? Was that a Black community there that people were buried there? What do we know?
Well, there was a section that was called Anderson's Lot, and that was owned by an African American family, and there were African American businesses there. But at the time that was going on, this was outside the city limit, and then the city limit expanded. And there were lots of articles in the paper about how the cemeteries were a health hazard or all sorts of other things. I mean, you can go back and look in the newspaper. It's just, it's incredible reading it. And again, as they mentioned in the movie, some of it was they wanted to make a park. Some of it was complain about health hazards. There's just a whole string of different excuses in the paper about what they're doing. So, but at any rate, I've seen the original offer to move the bodies, and it was subcontracted, and they were moved.
Wow.
So somehow Mother African Union Church became at least the caretaker, whether or not they own the property. They definitely, it was spoken during the video that they have taken ownership. So at least they're working on it. I think that Newcastle County park system, it's planning to include the Hockessin Colored School number 107. I think that's all a part of the Newcastle County kind of taking some of these sites and making them part of the national of the park system for their historical importance, really. So I suspect it's kind of bundled with that in a way.
Yeah, that's outside my expertise. So
I'm
I just read.
interested. I'm
I
interested.
read death records. That's what I do.
I'm interested in the boxes, the file boxes you found at the Delaware Historical Society. Were those primarily listing the bodies by number,
Nope,
by the numbers you
not at
mentioned?
all.
Okay, so what are those?
Between 1925 and 1932, through something I don't really understand, and I am not going to attempt to decipher it, the city of Wilmington had a burial permit tax. And those file folders are the onion skin copies of the permits that were issued for people to be buried at Mount Olive. And it turned out to be an absolute gold mine and a pain in the neck to go through because they are onion skin, they are fragile, and they are in little file folders. But those are the only places, those little 6-year section of records is the only records that indicate a burial plot. The death records don't have plots. That's how I found Bill's grandfather. He died in that time frame, and the person who got the permit and buried him marked on there it was stone 407.
Wow.
It was just a fluke.
Wow.
I liked your shot of the during a drought, all sorts of things appear.
Mm-hmm.
We have a driveway at our church. Our church has been on that site since 1918. When was the church? 1886, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's a drought, the original driveway is right across our front lawn.
Exactly.
And you could see the beautiful sweeping curve right
Mm-hmm.
up right up to where the church is.
Yep. And
Uh,
that's exactly what I was able to see in that aerial shot.
But I also saw a lot of, and the reason is, of course, is the roots of the grass can't go down as deep, and
Right.
the water is apparently drained away from that thing. So those are the grass that dries out the soonest and goes brown. But also on that shot, I could see rows and rows of graves.
Oh, yeah.
So all without stones, probably, I would think.
Most of them do not have stones. There's only 930-ish stones, and that includes just the numbers. I mean, stones that don't have names on them unless they were that 7-year period. We don't have any record of who's buried with those numbers. Different undertakers served the cemetery, and those would have been their records.
Sure, yeah.
So, Annie Gray buried people for 20 years, but
Yeah.
we don't have her records, so we don't know where they went.
Do you know the site called Find a Grave?
Yes.
What does that site do? Do they just take contributions to, because there's you go there and I can find my relatives on Find a Grave, and there's a picture of the gravestone.
It is completely volunteer.
It's all
And
volunteer.
my buddy Brian, previously mentioned, who lives in Minnesota, is taking all the work I have done and transferring it to Find a Grave, so it will be maintained there. I mean, I have my own site, but which has a lot of the history and a lot of other information. I'll put it in the chat. I also just put a newspaper article in the chat that is helpful, talks a little bit about the history. But It's all volunteer. And if there's no stone, of course, unless you've got someone who has looked at the death records,
Yeah.
they're not going to be able to indicate that somebody's there.
Right.
Now, in our case, we've been doing all the research for burials through death records, through newspapers, through church programs, through whatever else we can find. But if someone's just walking around taking pictures and you don't have a stone, it's probably not going to be there unless they have personal knowledge that that body's there.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have stones. It's a hard fact.
There was mention of drought and being able to see things that you couldn't see them before. I used to work at Bartyville Plaza also, and I remember we had a serious rainstorm, and there was an amazing flood that passed through our end of Bartyville Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the creek that's closer to Mount Olive. So I think it's a bigger creek. That must have been pretty impressive there too.
Mm-hmm. I dropped the newspaper article and a link to my site in the chat so that there's a lot more history, a lot more photos and stuff like that. So,
What got you interested in this, Regina?
Mount Olive particularly, or this in general?
Well, maybe both.
Both. I'd like to know both.
Well, Mount Olive in particular is because Brother Frankie stopped by the library. I was volunteering that day, and I made the utterly stupid statement, I can make a list. And I'm one of those people that if I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm still working on it, and it's 14 years later.
Oh.
What got me interested in general was my mother is from a part of Missouri that does not have paved roads. And we went out there to visit when I was about 12. And I'm in downtown DC, so I am unimpressed. And my great uncle took me around to some of the cemeteries around the area and was telling me stories. And he said, I know I'm on the census because I remember the guy coming to the house on the horse. Do you think you can find me on the census because you're in DC?
Wow.
So I'm 12, right? So I get on the bus, I go down in the archives, and I go up to room 400, which is still where the census is. And the sign says no one under 16 allowed. So I have my notebook, I have my goal. I want to see the 1880 census for Worth County, Missouri. Thank you. Walked up to the counter, told the archivist what I wanted to see. He said, are you 16? I said, yes. And this was before you had to have ID. And they brought out the actual book of the 1880 census that had ridden around on the horse that my great uncle remembered. And I was hooked from there on out.
Wow, that is a story.
Oh, lying worked at the Library of Congress a week later, too. I told him I was 16. So.
Wow.
But just seeing him listed in 1880 and knowing I had talked to him, and he was a very old man at the time, and just seeing that connection kind of got me hooked on the whole thing.
Wonderful.
So if you have requests from people who had, people who had ancestors that grew up in Wilmington, and they said, could you check on my loved one? So could you find the records in the county courthouse?
I don't go anywhere. I do it all online except for Mount Olive, physically taking pictures there because I just don't have time. I mean, I was working full time through December, but.
Would those records be in the county courthouses, and can you access them
It would be a waste of your time to do that before you used everything that was online for free. Because I'm big on the free and I'm big on the easy.
Okay, sure.
I mean, all the records I've used for Mount Olive are all free online, with the exception of walking around with a machete taking pictures.
And so the actual the places that you're checking online are particular sites?
Yes, I use familysearch.org a lot because it's completely free. 100% behind that. I do have an Ancestry account, but you can use Ancestry at your public library for free. Take a flash drive, it's all yours. And there are lots of free lessons on how to do this on FamilySearch.org.
Okay.
And I always tell people, first, watch the video on how to do this. Start with what you know and work your way backwards, recognizing that there are privacy limits on some information. Birth records are 100 years, death records are 50 in Delaware, varies by state. And work from what you know to what you don't know, and recognize that you're not going to get a birth certificate in Delaware in 1860. They didn't keep the records.
Yeah.
So it's very important to know what records were kept at what time and at what level for whomever you're trying to research. And you can end up with 3 or 4 different levels. Wilmington had records, Newcastle County had records, Delaware had records. Federal records exist. So you got to kind of go through the layers like a fancy cake.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't match. No one can spell, no one can do math.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that online. I said, no. Will
When
the
in
last?
doubt, sound it out, say it out loud,
Yep,
and
right,
see if it's the same.
right. I mean, with a name like Reiner, you see everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you said Ancestry is free at public libraries. I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I'll be darned.
And it's free at family history libraries that the Mormon Church supports. They're usually by appointment, or in Wilmington, it's most Saturdays because I volunteer at the one in Wilmington one day a month.
Yeah, I do Family Search.
And Family Search is free at your house.
Yeah.
So I'm all about the free. I put 2 kids through college, so I'm all about the free.
Regina, I'm wondering, with your interest in this history, and honestly, when I travel, I love going through graveyards and looking at the tombstones. But I'm wondering what your opinion is about today's world when so many people want to be cremated instead of buried, with sometimes no record of where other than a death certificate, where their ashes were spread. What's your thought about that?
I think it's up to the person and their family. Not
Well,
my
no,
business.
I don't mean about that. I mean about how we look back on today. What does that do to our historical record? Do you have
It's
concerns?
just a different approach. I mean, my whole story about Uncle Preston, okay? I got on the bus and went down to the archives and got the book. Right now, I can sit at my desk, I can pull that same thing up on my computer and get a better look at it because it's digitized, it's in better format. So you're making record trails now, they're just a different shape and size and a different means of access.
Yeah.
But for example, Westminster has a memorial garden
Mhm.
where ashes can be interred. Is that location recorded in public records somewhere? Because
I don't know what a current
I'm sorry.
I don't know what a current death certificate in Delaware looks like. I know that the ones that I have access to that are 50 years and older don't include a grave site, but they mostly include a place where you got dumped or buried or whatever. Some of them,
I mean, most death certificates are issued independent of a burial. So,
right.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, Sue, because Concord has a memorial garden as well, and we have a record. We have a book of who's interred there. Whose ashes are there.
But
And if there's an obit in the newspaper, that's going to probably be online and it will say ashes privately, whatever.
Probably not. Probably not.
Often it'll say interment will be private.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
but there's still a record that something happened to that person's ashes
A record
privately
where?
in the newspaper.
Okay,
Interment will be private.
but no way to track whether they're at Mount Olive Cemetery or any particular place, right? Interesting.
That's interesting. I need to go to another commitment, but it's been very interesting, and thank you very much for making this happen.
Thanks for being here, John. Good to see you.
Take care, John.
Bye, John.
Well, this is just so fascinating. And thank you for all the great work you've done, Regina, and are continuing to do. I guess you're um, going on with this search.
Well, let's see. The last thing I stopped was January 1867, City of Wilmington. Second file. That's where I am. It's digital records. So page by page.
A way to go.
Thank you.
Thank you so
great.
much. And thank you, Sandy,
That's
for
great.
arranging this and for showing that lovely video. It's
It's a
really
great video. I've watched it
fascinating.
many times,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I
really,
think they did a wonderful job.
they
Yeah.
sure did. It's
Yeah.
just, and hopefully we'll have many more people watch this and learn. And I've tried to, I don't personally do a lot of yard work myself, as Roger will tell you. But I've tried to talk it up for any people who might enjoy the camaraderie of going down with Bill Jones and, you know, pulling out the mowers and giving some respect to the people there. And I mentioned something to Mike Ganade because it would be a cool sort of joint venture with to connect with some people from Mother African Church. And
The grass grows every week.
Yeah.
it does. It's starting, especially now and on on into the summer. So it's I just learned so much, and I think we need to do better than has been done in many years in the past and try and help to bring some respect and dignity to these people who
Well, I
didn't.
figure, getting the names at least in one spot is helpful.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then, making that available, it's wonderful. So is there, when you find out people that are there, then is it, you know, for the families of those people that you've discovered that they're there, that go ahead and make a stone, or might there be a fund for helping to provide that?
There is no money. Um,
Not by the county or?
I don't know. I don't know anything about money, so I'm being a little bit facetious. When we got the USCT markers for Almarine Bush, and we've got another one on order, those are free from the VA if you prove that, that person deserved a stone, and then you have to find someone to help set it properly so that it doesn't sink straight down into the earth.
Right.
And, I don't know of any new stones that have been put there other than the ones we've done for the veterans.
Okay. Okay.
And it's very expensive to raise stones that have fallen or need to be reset.
Wow.
Well, thank you for your work. And Sandy, thank you for bringing this as a program. And who knows, we may get some Tuesday or Thursday morning volunteers to head out to the cemetery every now and again. You never know.
That would be wonderful, I think.
It would. It would.
So many thanks, Regina. Really, really learning from you, and good to see everyone. Thanks for coming.
All right.
Alrighty.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.